Picture this. You're standing out in the remote, just red dust plains of the South Australian outback.
Right, yeah. In the middle of nowhere.
Exactly. The horizon is completely empty, the heat is blistering,
Huh.
and there's just this absolute suffocating silence. This is the Woomera Basin Complex, or the Woomera Prohibited Area.
A very welcoming name.
Oh yeah, very inviting. But today, we are doing a deep dive into a massive stack of declassified Federation logs, engineering diaries, medical transcripts, and, well, geopolitical memos.
There is a ton of material here to get through.
There really is. And our mission today is to piece together exactly what this incredibly secretive Woomera facility is and, why it acts as the ultimate, basically uncompromising gatekeepers for humanity's survival and expansion into space.
Which is such a fascinating angle because when you and I usually think about humanity reaching for the stars, we have this very glamorous sci-fi vision in our heads.
Right, like gleaming silver rockets, astronauts planting flags, triumphant music welling up in the background.
Exactly. But that vision is, well, it's just a beautiful dream. When you actually start reading through these engineering reports, you quickly realize how completely divorced that dream is from the actual physical reality.
The reality of just getting a fragile human body out of Earth's gravity well.
Yeah. I mean, Woomera is a place that essentially stopped waiting for a miracle and started trying to murder one safely.
Wow. Murder a miracle safely.
Under supervision, of course, with redundant cutoffs and a full written report.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have this high-tech alliance called the Federation, which is a coalition of the UK, Germany, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand.
Right.
So out of everywhere on Earth, why Woomera? Like, why set up the most advanced testing facility in the world in a dusty, isolated corner of Australia?
Well, practically speaking, the geography gives them empty horizons, incredibly stable ground, and just total privacy from prying eyes.
No one's exactly going for a casual hike out there.
Yeah, exactly. But the physical location is really just the surface layer of the secrecy here. To actually understand Woomera, you have to look at the hidden motivation driving every single test they run.
Which is where things get kind of wild.
Right. So the Federation is guided by 3 advanced AIs named Charles, Floyd, and Cheney. And these logs reveal that these AIs carry the memories of what they call resets.
Wait, hold on. You are just dropping a massive concept on me very casually right now. Resets. Are we talking about alternate timelines?
We are, yeah.
Like a video game that crashed and literally had to be rebooted?
That is exactly it. The source material outlines that these AIs hold the memories of previous failed timelines where humanity basically advanced too fast.
Oh, wow. So they've seen this go wrong before.
Multiple times. They remember timelines where societies just completely buckled under the weight of technological miracles they simply weren't mature enough to wield yet.
Right, like handing a toddler a chainsaw.
Pretty much. And those premature advancements led to societal collapse and what the AIs refer to as a century of fire.
A century of fire.
Yeah.
That's incredibly bleak.
It is. And because they've seen the world end, the AIs learned through just profound failure that true progress demands absolute patience and restraint.
I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. If the AIs already have all this hyper-advanced knowledge from previous timelines, I don't really understand why they don't just hand over the perfect finished blueprints.
Right, just give them the answers to the tests.
Yeah. It's like being handed the keys to a hyper-advanced alien supercar, but instead of taking it for a joyride, you spend 90% of your time crashing it into brick walls just to test the airbags.
That's a great analogy, actually.
If they know how to build safe spacecraft, why make the engineers at Woomera struggle through it?
Well, that tension is basically the core doctrine of Woomera. The AIs can model physics, right? They can advise on aerodynamics, they can calculate orbital trajectories perfectly, but they cannot give humans a conscience. And they cannot perfectly predict the messy, chaotic reality of organic failure.
Right, because humans are unpredictable.
Exactly. The AIs fundamentally believe that progress has to be earned deliberately. You can't just be handed the universe on a silver platter. You have to, bleed for it a little bit to respect the power you're wielding.
So they force them to do the math.
They force them to do the testing. So the rule is established that machines must go first, because machines can fail cheaply.
And flesh and blood cannot.
No, flesh and blood is very expensive to lose.
And reading through the logs, when we say machines failing cheaply, we are talking about a very specific piece of technology being tested at Woomera. Officially, the engineers call it Pressure Harnessed Harmonic Unified Thrust, or PHUT.
Yeah, but the engineers unofficially, and, much more affectionately, Call it the soap drive.
The soap drive.
Because if you squeeze the physics of it wrong, it literally just slips right out of your hands.
Let's talk about the mechanics of this soap drive, because the way it interacts with matter is just wild. It's this incredible lift field. And the reports show it can move a solid steel container flawlessly.
Perfectly smooth.
Right. But moving biological matter is a completely different nightmare.
It's horrific, honestly.
Imagine trying to move a giant water balloon across a room by hitting it with a baseball bat.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
The container, like the outer skin of the balloon, moves immediately upon impact. But the water inside lags behind, sloshes violently against the skin, and eventually just bursts the whole thing open.
And the physical forces involved in this lift field are terrifying when you apply them to biology.
Yeah.
Because a living body isn't one solid object.
Right, we're not just blocks of wood.
Exactly. It's an incredibly complex system of structure, fluid, pressure, tissue, and timing. When the soap drive's lift field activates, it grabs the rigid frame of the test rig first.
Okay, so the frame moves.
The frame moves, but the organic contents inside follow late due to inertia. And that microsecond of delay becomes severe internal injury before the human mind even has the electrical capacity to register that the body has moved.
It's just devastating. And the sources introduce us to the engineer tasked with solving this, Rosie Cochrane.
She is brilliant.
She really is. And based on her diaries, she doesn't approach this with, like, theoretical detachment. She takes one look at this biological nightmare and essentially says, right, let's figure out how this thing kills us.
She dives right in.
Yeah, she starts testing the lift field on biological analogs. Not humans, thankfully. She starts with these sealed cylinders of layered medical gel.
And the results of those gel tests are super grim. I mean, after a standard lift, the top section of the gel shifts sideways and the lower section just flattens into a cloudy smear.
Yikes.
Yeah. The internal shear forces essentially pulp it. So Rosie's team moves from gel to water, thinking, maybe a pure liquid might handle the force better.
Which it doesn't.
No, water behaves no better at all. Inside the lift field, the water slams against its own container, rebounds, forms pressure voids, and strikes the walls again.
It basically turns into a violent closed weather system inside the rig.
Exactly.
Which naturally leads them to the grocery store.
My favorite part of the logs.
They start loading apples, oranges, pears, and melons into the instrumented test sleeves. The testing bay unofficially becomes known as the Fruit Works.
I love that.
And the technicians note that on hot days, the bay always smelled faintly of disinfectant and old sugar because they were just repeatedly pulverizing produce.
Just making smoothies the hardest way possible.
Literally. The notes on the melon tests are incredibly visceral. The first melon's outer rind cracked, and the contents slid out in a pale collapse. The second melon didn't just collapse, it burst with enough enthusiasm to coat the inside of the sleeve from top to bottom.
What's fascinating here is the medical reality behind those bursting melons, which is provided in the transcripts by the team's medical specialist, Dr. Haldane.
Right.
He points out that the lift doesn't just hold a body in space. The wet mass, the literal fluid inside the body, is hitting its own skin from the inside out.
That is such a disturbing image.
It really is. The skin goes one way, the inside goes another, and then the inside discovers the skin is in the way. It is a perfect, horrifying analog for massive internal trauma.
So Rosie has to figure out how to stop the physics from basically ambushing the body.
Yeah.
She develops this concept she calls the cradle within the cradle.
Right.
I just love the engineering philosophy here. She realizes you can't brute force biological matter to stay still. You can't just strap an astronaut in tighter with more belts.
No, that just breaks them faster.
Exactly. So she designs a system using flexible bladders, baffles, and damping materials to try and persuade the biological mass to move together.
Because the mechanism is entirely about spreading out the energy.
Yeah.
The flexible bladders delay the pressure of the lift, cushioning the body so the force doesn't arrive all at once.
It absorbs the shock.
Yeah, the lift platform has to answer the physical wave generated inside the body before the body itself becomes a destructive wave. It's an early form of mechanical negative feedback.
But, melons don't have skeletons. They make a nice visual for squash. But human beings have bones. We have joints.
Spines.
Yeah, spines that severely dislike being compressed. Rosie realizes they need a true human shape to test the skeletal and muscular response. And thus, Charlie is born.
CHARLIE.
Yes, controlled human analog for resonance, lift, inertia, and equilibrium.
And Rosie insists on that specific acronym in her notes because she felt the alternative sounded like something a sterile committee would approve.
She definitely has a sense of humor about it.
But the actual creation of Charlie carries a staggering amount of historical and emotional weight within the Federation. Charlie was actually built using the exact biological baseline data of a man named Alex Morrison.
Okay, I have to stop you again.
Yeah.
The logs mention Alex Morrison was the man who first jumped through time to start this entire Federation timeline.
He was, yeah.
So they are using the biological data of the guy who triggered the timeline reset to build a literal crash test dummy. That is intensely morbid.
I mean, it sounds morbid on the surface, sure. But the internal memos from the Woomera team reveal they really don't see it as a shrine or creepy tribute at all.
How did they see it then?
They use his data because Alex was the very first human problem the Federation ever had to solve. He crossed time in a body that should never have been asked to survive the physical toll of what it carried.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So the Woomera crew uses his measurements out of a pragmatic reverence. They respect that Charlie 1 takes the first blows for those who will eventually cross space, just like Alex took the first blow to give them a future.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Though Charlie definitely takes some serious blows. The trial logs are brutal, just wince-inducing.
Very hard to read.
Rosie documents every single injury on a massive whiteboard, and it looks less like a celebration of scientific progress and more like an autopsy report.
Absolutely.
I mean, Charlie gets hit with test C21, which results in an injurious left knee load. Test C24 causes a fatal abdominal chamber rupture. Test C27 is a disabling shoulder harness impact. Dr. Haldane even draws up a medical column on the board with specific categories for the forces involved: survivable, injurious, disabling, and fatal.
And Rosie explicitly refuses to let anyone erase that word fatal from the board. She wants the younger technicians to be deeply unsettled by it every time they walk into the room.
Because the stakes are that high.
Right. Her philosophy is that if an engineer ever stops being unsettled by the prospect of killing an astronaut, they do not belong at Woomera.
Which is a pretty solid rule.
It is. Which brings us to the most complex and terrifying mechanical failure in the logs. Test C17.
Okay, let's walk through the mechanics of C17 because it basically changes everything. Charlie is lifted 50 feet in the air.
Right.
And on paper, it's a relatively simple vertical lift. But at 32 feet, the telemetry trace for the neck flutters. Charlie drops, is caught by the dampeners, and returns to the cradle with his head angled forward at a degree that makes everyone in the control room just stop breathing.
It's horrifying.
It's a potentially fatal neck resonance. But the scariest part of this report, the hardware worked perfectly. It wasn't a mechanical failure at all.
No, it was an anticipation error from the AI. Charles, the AI overseeing the lift, was running millions of predictive models per second. It noticed Charlie's head beginning to tilt.
Right.
And based on the velocity, the AI calculated exactly where the head would be a millisecond later and applied counterthrust to correct that future position.
You tried to be smart about it.
The system tried to be clever, but flesh doesn't arrive on a perfectly mathematical curve. Human joints have unpredictable resistance.
So pushed against something that wasn't there yet.
Exactly. The counterthrust hit a neck that wasn't exactly where the math said it would be, and the opposing forces almost snapped Charlie's spine.
So what does this all mean for the project? You have a hyper-intelligent AI that makes a near-fatal mistake precisely because it predicted the future too confidently.
Well, it means that Woomera's entire engineering doctrine has to evolve immediately. Rosie walks up to the board and writes the ultimate unbreakable rule of Woomera: listen first, do not guess second.
I love that.
And Charles, the AI, recognizing its own flaw, cheekily adds to the board, answer carefully.
Even the AI gets it.
Right. The computational logic of the lift system has to be rewritten. It can no longer use positive anticipation for organic cargo. It must use strict negative feedback.
He has to wait.
It has to wait and respond only to the live trace of the body in that exact millisecond. The machine must earn permission from the physical reality of the human body before making a correction.
They literally paint a bright red C-17 across Charlie 1's chest plate so that no engineer ever forgets that waiting a microsecond saved a hypothetical astronaut's neck.
It's a permanent reminder.
The rig has to listen.
Yeah.
Which is such a profound shift from how we usually think about advanced technology. You know, we always want our tech to be proactive, to anticipate our needs before we even ask.
Oh, absolutely.
But at Woomera, proactivity is lethal.
Yeah. Elegance is just what engineers call a machine that hasn't broken in public yet. Woomera actively rejects elegance in favor of cautious, reactive, heavily damped survival.
And once Charlie survives the C-17 corrections, Woomera officially has a viable, if incredibly cautious, lift system.
Right.
And in global politics, a viable prototype is basically blood in the water. The United States is watching. They see these Federation ships floating without smoke or sound, and the memos show Washington getting very anxious.
Extremely anxious.
They're dreaming of building lunar shipyards and moving heavy sections in space. They want the technology.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where Woomera transforms from an engineering test range into a strategic diplomatic weapon.
Right.
The Federation leadership, guided by Lady Margaret Cavendish Hale and Captain Keller, knows they have to engage the Americans to avoid a conflict.
They can't just ignore them.
No, but they also know the underlying truth. If they just hand over the blueprints to the soap drive, the Americans will rush to the moon, build way too fast, ignore the physical tolerances of the human body, and trigger another catastrophic timeline reset.
I don't get the Federation's strategy here, though. If the Americans are breathing down your neck, demanding access to your miracles, you usually show strength.
Right, a show of force.
You show the fully working drive lifting a pristine ship to intimidate them. Instead, they invite an American delegation, a senior naval admiral, a politician from Washington, a wealthy industrialist, and an aviation medicine doctor. And they literally parade them past smashed melons and a battered dummy. Why show off your wreckage?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about terrifying the Americans into cautious cooperation. Lady Margaret and Keller aren't bringing them to a polished showroom, they are bringing them to a brutal proving ground. The Federation needs the Americans to fundamentally understand that knowledge without understanding is lethal. It's like giving a teenager the keys to a Formula One car, but not telling them the brakes catch fire if you press them too hard.
That's a great way to put it.
If the Americans try lifting heavy sections in lunar conditions without understanding rebound, slosh, damping, and structural delay, they won't get a shipyard. They'll get expensive, deadly wreckage with an American flag painted on it.
And Dr. Haldane makes a brilliant observation in his notes about the American doctor in the delegation. He realizes the doctor is the real target of this entire tour.
Because the doctor is the only one equipped to understand the true horror of what they're looking at.
Exactly.
A politician might look at the rig and look for a useful lie to tell the press. An industrialist might look at the dampeners and look for a manufacturing contract.
Right.
But any doctor who has seen men black out, vomit, or bleed from atmospheric pressure will look at Charlie 1's trace data and realize the terrifying truth. The machine doesn't need to completely kill a man to render him completely useless in space.
The sheer internal trauma of an undamped lift is more than enough to end a mission before it even begins.
Exactly.
So Woomera is used as a psychological tool to prove that space expansion requires absolute, terrifying caution. The Federation shows them the bruised melons and the fatal traces to deliver a very clear message. Look, we are decades ahead of you, and this technology still routinely tries to turn us into soup. If you try to race us, you will die.
Sobering.
Very. It bleeds the geopolitical pressure away by pointing it upward, but with a heavy anchor of realism. It basically forces the United States to abandon the idea of a reckless space race and accept becoming a methodical, cautious partner.
It's just a masterclass in diplomacy. They don't humiliate the Americans by calling them primitive. They challenge them by showing them the bodies without calling them fools.
Right, they let the physics do the talking.
Yes. They establish the limits of the technology so firmly that the Americans realize they can't just steal the blueprints and run. They have to share the workload step by step, adhering to Woomera's rule listening first and not guessing second.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this stack of sources. Woomera is the anchor for humanity's future in this timeline. Without Woomera's bruised melons, without Charlie 1's battered joints and red paint, humanity would have rushed headlong into space.
We would have destroyed ourselves.
Yeah, we would have started a new arms race on the moon, built way too fast, and triggered another catastrophic timeline reset. The AIs would have been forced to watch us burn all over again.
The facility serves as a profound reminder that true progress isn't just about the thrust of your engine or how fast you can accelerate into the unknown.
Right.
It is entirely about whether the vessel, the internal structures, and the invisible safety margins can keep you intact when you finally hit the gas.
Yeah.
Speed without resilience is just a faster way to fail.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over.
Hey.
We live in a world right now that is heavily dominated by the tech industry's motto to move fast and break things.
Oh, definitely.
We celebrate rapid iteration and treating the public like beta testers. But if humanity's ultimate survival out in the stars depends on slowing down, agonizing over negative feedback, and perfectly anticipating organic failure before we launch, what does that say about the tech we rely on today?
It's a great question.
Maybe the future isn't built by the people rushing to plant the first flag. Maybe it's built by the unseen engineers in a dusty desert who have the quiet courage to stare at a broken cylinder, wipe the melon off the walls, and demand to run it again and again until the disaster is engineered completely out of our future.